Alrighty, it's looking like we got a steady group. Nice to see people introducing themselves. We're 2 minutes past the hour, so I'll go ahead and get us officially started. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for the Track 4 installment of our first Noyce PI peer webinar series. My name is Drew Stammel, my pronouns are he, they, and I'm a program associate with the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or IC program at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This new series, offered in collaboration by AAAS and the NSF Noyce program, centers on developing and implementing grants for the 4 Noyce tracks. Presenters are Noyce PIs who have led multiple grants to prepare and retain STEM teachers in urban and rural high-need schools and have shared research about their work. Presenters will describe their work on a Noyce grant, general and specific issues that can arise, strategies that foster success, and other advice for Noyce project leaders. And as mentioned, today's session focuses on track 4, which is the Noyce research track. And before I formally introduce our wonderful speakers and jump into the webinar, I have a few housekeeping notes that I'd like to share. As you'll see on the slide, the presentation is being recorded, and the recording along with a slide deck the speakers will be using as a resource will be made available in the coming weeks on our website at nsfnoyce.org. You'll also receive an email with the link to the recording when it's available, and we also have closed captioning for this workshop, which you can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And to discuss track 4, we are honored to be joined by Drs. Doug Larkin and Julie Luft. Dr. Larkin is a professor of teaching and learning at Montclair State University with a current Noyce project that's a secondary STEM teacher education scholarship program. And Dr. Luft is a distinguished research professor at the University of Georgia, and her current Noyce project is entitled Recruiting, Preparing, and Inducting Secondary Mathematics and Science Teachers in Northeast Georgia. Since I know I'm not the one you're here to hear from today, I'll pass over to our wonderful speakers and we'll get going. So I'll pull down my slides, share to you both.
Hi, great. Everybody can you see? Yeah, it's great to be here. We're delighted to be here today. And Doug and I have done this before, so I'll start off and then I'll start off and introduce myself. Yes, I do have a current Noyce that is a scholarship program, but I also have a research program for Noyce. And it's actually focused on looking at how newly hired teachers access resources in terms of building their resilience. So we're tracking 30 early career secondary science teachers over 5 years. And we're looking at how they access human resources, social resources, physical resources, the things you would use in labs, and also their knowledge resources. And then we're looking to see if that prevents them from burning out. It's an interesting study. It has a strong theoretical frame to it. But so far we're making great progress, and we're done with the first 2 years of data collection, and we're actually going to try to see if we can collect data for another year, which we're on our way. So we have some good longitudinal data. And anyway, and I am at the University of Georgia, and I do work in science teacher education. I'll just pass it over to you, Doug.
Okay, thanks, Julie. So I'm Doug Larkin. I'm at Montclair State University. That's in New Jersey. We're about 10 miles west of New York City. And I also have a current Track 1 scholarship grant, but I believe today we're going to talk about the Track 4s. And so we just wrapped up a 5-year Track 4 grant, and we're currently we are under contract to write a book about our findings. And so I'm neck deep in in communicating what it is that we found. And basically, our study is quite different from Julie's in that ours was a national study. We looked at districts that were doing a good job at retaining science teachers, and we used state level staffing data to figure that out. And then we went to those districts to try to figure out what they were doing and why science teachers stayed in those districts. And the elevator speech I'm giving to everybody is this: the department is the mentor. The science department is the reason why science teachers stay. It's because of the fit, the links, the assets that they have as a result of being there. And so I think today we're going to talk about all things Track 4, and we would like to center it on the questions that you're coming with. We do have some slides. We've decided to keep those slides off screen. I'll share the link if you feel like you want to follow. Oops, I accidentally added a slide. Let me undo. Okay, there. Let me hit the correct. Getting the right window is always a trick. Okay, so if you feel like you want to follow along, the slides are there, but we're not going to put them on the screen. We would like to center your questions, and I think what Julie and I decided to do for the beginning of this session is to really just start there. And we know how to do wait time, so you can either do the hand raising thing. I don't think I can see everybody, and I think people have cameras off, but if you would like to just raise your hand, or you can type a question into the chat if you would like to do that. Either way. So we're going to pause for about 10, 15 seconds and let people either type out a question or find the hand raise button on Zoom.
And if you don't have a question, maybe you can just write like what you hope to learn today. Or if you're just here because it's interesting. You will wait longer than 15 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Neha, are you raising your hand? Hello.
No.
Or are you just saying hi? Okay.
Just saying hi.
Okay. Hello.
How are you?
We're doing well.
I was just going to say that here, this is Deepika Menon from University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I was just going to say that I am here because this is tailored towards track 4. We are in our 3rd year of track 4, so I'm here to learn about folks who have completed or do have track 4. So that's why I'm here.
That's actually great.
Okay. So maybe Julie, why don't we go ahead and start with we have short list of, and really this is very like tips and tricks centered, which I hope is what people are coming for. But we want to make sure that we can open this up and take this any direction that you feel that you can, tap us for. So the first tip that I'll start with is to use your Track 4 grant as an institutional tool. Sometimes our institutions aren't well suited to the things we need them to do. But institutions like having grants, and grants sometimes have requirements that the institution doesn't quite know how to do. And yet, so the Track 4 is actually a really good opportunity to get your university to create new structures, or address old problems. A very common one at smaller universities is post-award grant management capacities, right? So if your university doesn't have a post-grant management person, which is probably not the case at UNL, but like we had one that was university-wide, but we found we really needed somebody who was in our college, right? So it may be just using your grant to create those additional structures that's going to allow you to do the work that you promised NSF that you would do, or if you're writing a grant that you're saying that you will do. So this helps not just you in the moment, but it helps build that capacity at your university to even do this kind of work. And so I found, and I'll give a tangible example of something that we've used. So I've had 2 track 1s and 1 track 4, and many of the individuals that have worked on these grants have sort of crossed different boundary lines from one grant to another. But one of the things that we found we needed on the track 4 was a capacity to do large-scale data analysis in the College of Ed. And so we had to set up servers. We had to set up, and we needed one that was a private server because of confidentiality issues, which we'll talk about later. And our IT didn't quite, they hadn't dealt with that problem before. But because we had this grant, and NSF comes with a bit of prestige that you can use for stuff like this, to say, no, we have this NSF grant. We need to set up this private server where only these people are going to be able to access it. And we were able to do that. And in doing that, we helped our IT folks kind of grow their skill set. And so now we were the first group to do that, but we weren't the last. There's other people who have come after us to use those kinds of tools that we helped push. So that's the first tip is, it's easy to say, well, I guess we don't do that at our university, but I would flip that around and say, you don't do it yet, but now this is the opportunity to get your university to do that stuff.
You know, and I just want to piggyback on that, Doug, if that's okay. I think this is a great tip because at the University of Georgia, it turned out we have a pool of money that we use for student workers. And we were talking about this in one of our projects, and we said, boy, we need some way to give some more stipends or to do something with some of the people. And we were actually able to tap into an existing pot of money and reallocate it for to support the Noyce grant, which I thought was really kind of cool. And so I love this idea of thinking, and they saw it as like, you know, these people are already doing work that's research oriented, and we had never thought of reallocating or redirecting this fund that sits right within the line of what we do. So I just wanted to highlight Doug's tip is great.
That gives me one more thing that we did with ours that nobody had ever done before. Like we had doctoral assistants. We had over the life of the grant, we had 6 different doc assistants, and some of them wanted to take courses in the summer. Nobody had ever asked, could doc students use their assistantship to have those credits in the summer? And so we pushed our university, and it turned out to be no big deal at all. But nobody had asked to do that before. And, you know, originally the answer was, no, I don't think so, but let me check. And then it was, oh, I guess we can do this. Okay. Passing off to you there.
All right, I love that. Thanks, Doug. So the tip I have is the easy one, right? It's share your work. And I think it's really important. Like you are doing some really great work. And these track 4s are so important because they're really sharing information, or they're getting at information about thinking about the Noyce scholars in ways we haven't thought about them before. And we need this information. And if you don't share your work yearly or regularly beyond, and I'm going to not only at the Noyce conference, but beyond, it doesn't go anywhere. And it's so important. And it's so frustrating to me when I run into a Noyce PI and I start talking about something that I've done, and they said, well, I did that. And I'm like, well, where can I get access to it? I'd like to look at it, and I don't see it. So I think, you know, as simple as, you know, presenting at, you know, a conference, it could be AST, the Association of Science Teacher Educators, or AMT, the math education conferences. It could be any of the, you know, the bigger National Science Teaching Association conferences where we have teachers, but sharing your work publicly is so important. And it really helps. It does so many things. It informs other people who are working in the frontier of working with teachers, science and math teachers. And it helps us know better how to construct programs, how to do things in more thoughtful ways. It also, it also is important because it gets people talking too about work, which is critical. So sharing it at conferences, making sure that your information is publicly accessible. I think ResearchGate is a great place to share work. If you make a PDF of your slides and put them up, or put the paper up and put draft on it, it's a way that, you know, I know in my group, we often look through ResearchGate to find out what's going on. So just make sure you share it. Share it either through presentations, through publications, or even on the social media, right, through ResearchGate. I also post stuff on Facebook or on LinkedIn, like we've presented this. I think these are just really important venues. And I just want to say one more reason why it's important. The more we share our work, the more we demonstrate how important this field is to our society, right? And, you know, you're funded by public dollars, and the more visibility you give to your work in a wide-reaching manner, you know, it helps the public understand how important this field is. It helps the people who are doing science and math education know how important it is. And it actually helps NSF, right? NSF can point to the fact that we have PIs who are sharing work and really sharing the findings that they have. So just take every opportunity to share your work. I'm going to pass it back to you, Doug.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. Let me just pause here and see if there's any questions or anything about those first two that anybody wants to probe us on.
Actually, I just have a question for the audience. Maybe you guys can put in the chat. How many people here have presented at a conference or put their work on social media? And you can just put down in the chat, I do, I do, I do, I do. Or how many people? So lovely. Got great.
Great. Oh.
Kind of NSTA near and dear to my heart. Okay.
So the next tip is this was for me really like on my academic bucket list was I wanted to lead a research team. I hadn't done that. I hadn't been part of a research team even in grad school. There were a couple going on around me, but I worked in supervising student teachers as for my assistantship. Um, but really, so the tip is embrace being a project leader. Um, and so I wanted to do that. And I think part of that is moving from that role of being a receiver of things to a giver of things, all academic. And so every person on your project, you, your colleagues, the doc students, postdocs, everybody brings a different set of knowledge, resources, skills, dispositions to that project. Everybody has their own reasons for being there. And it may take a little while before people are able to contribute in the way that you envision. And so part of that being a project leader is both, being a warm demander, but also being patient and nurturing. A brand new doc student on a research team may not quite know what to do, or the first written draft of something they turn into you may be quite terrible, but it's a solvable problem. They can work with you and they take, and if you work with them to give them feedback, because that's part of the reason a doctoral assistantship might exist on a project or a postdoc, is that you are working to develop that person's capacity to do this type of STEM education research. And so I would say no matter what, hold weekly meetings. If and this was something that I learned just from talking to colleagues at conferences, like, how do you run a team? Well, we at our weekly meeting, we do this. Oh, you hold weekly meetings? Like it was that kind of, I hadn't known that. So I would say if you have a project team, um, even if it includes other faculty, right? Like it's really important to have that sacred meeting time each week, whether it's in person or on Zoom, that everybody is held accountable to, whatever they're working on, they're going to share a bit of it that week. A related piece of that is figuring out what you can delegate versus what, like, okay, it's got to be done a particular way, so I'm going to do it. And it can feel uncomfortable if you've not been a delegator, and I was not a delegator. I kind of learned that both as a PI and then later as a department chair. Like you have to delegate in order to survive. But so you delegate a task and then you work with people. Some people have different skill sets with accomplishing tasks, and sometimes executive functioning around writing or conducting interviews or data. All of these things. It takes time, but that's what a project leader is, and that's what a project requires. So for me, like my own sort of way that I've thought about that is just to set boundaries for people. Okay, like I don't care how much time it takes you to get this done, but here's the task that needs to get done. And boy, we have this date coming up, and that task can't go beyond that date. But let me know what support you need within this time frame to get it done. So all of those sort of, some of it is the skills that those of us have been classroom teachers developed as classroom teachers, but it's different in a way because you're working with adults and not K-12 students or even undergrads who have a different, or you might be working with undergrads, I don't know, but still that whole being a project leader is a big part of this because I've reviewed, I've been on panels for a whole bunch of different Noyce grants. I've never seen one where it's just a single person submitting something like, yep, I'm going to do this all myself. Like it doesn't happen. And there's a reason for that. Part of it is in the Noyce in the RFP, but like the idea is that there's a team. Whatever your project is, there's a team there, and as the PI, you have to lead that team. And I'll leave it there. But Julie, you want to add anything onto that? You've certainly run your share of project teams.
Well, I just want to say what happened at my university. It was really not this year, but I found something out about my university. It turns out they have a group on campus that supports people who want to learn to be leaders,
Mhm.
and it's free. And so they kind of give you an executive coach, and you meet with that coach. And I thought I should remember this, because if you're a new grant PI, this would be, you should just see what capacity is in your university to build leadership among faculty or staff, whatever position you have. And I think it fits nicely with what Doug's saying, because it is a new position, and it really helps if you have somebody to help think through what you're doing and how you're making these decisions. So maybe your university may have a free program that you can access, and it's really worth tapping into.
For sure.
And Doug, I think there was one question in the chat. It said, you mentioned earlier grant managers. What's the relationship between the grant manager and the principal investigator? I don't know if this fits in that.
Yeah, I'll mention it here and then we'll come back in more detail. I think
Okay.
one of the other points about that, but there's different kinds of grant managers. There can be a project manager that you hire to run your grant, somebody who's, so for us, our project manager was the records person. They were the person who did the phone calls out to the school districts, because they had to be phone calls, they couldn't be emails. And to log the contacts and to sort of manage the whole project. Then there's the award managers at the university, which I think this question might be referring to. In either case, so that they will help you with, any sort of requirements, and all institutions have requirements, certifying, within your procurement system or whatever things you have to buy, or expenditures that you have. That person is going to be really important in sort of keeping the everything straight and making sure that everything is the way that it's supposed to be. But we would invite those people to our weekly meetings every once in a while. And they don't have to be there all the time, but they really appreciate being in the loop. It helps them get a different perspective on the work that they're doing. But all of this, everything that we're talking about today, has to do with building relationships with people and sustaining them over time. That's the real nature of this work. The knowledge pops out at the end, because that's what all this is geared towards. But really, in order for that to happen, there has to be good relationships. And we'll say this a little later, but at the end of the day, as a PI, you're the fiscal agent. You're the one who's responsible for the money. And so they'll do their job, but we still have kind of an oversight capacity. And people are human and make mistakes, and hey, that decimal point is in the wrong place or whatever. And you can't just offload everything to somebody else. That's not what being a PI is. Being a PI is being, the old phrase, the buck stops here, right? It does stop with you as the PI. I don't know if that gets at your question, Rhonda, but we'll circle back around to this. We have sort of something else to say about that in a minute. Why don't I hand it back off to you, Julie?
Great, thanks, Doug. So I guess my big point is, the next point is embrace change. And I'm sure Doug can agree. If any grant we worked really hard to write a plan, we put all the details in there, and in our mind, it's going to work seamlessly. And that just doesn't happen. And you just have to get used to that, and you have to embrace the change, is what I often say. And I also often say it's a good problem to have. So, we have to kind of work around these problems. And, some problems are small, like for instance, in our work, we work a lot with teachers, and teachers move schools. And that creates another layer of complexity, especially if they move from Georgia to Texas. How are we going to continue to track them? And we had to think of a new way to do that, because before we were actually in the classroom, and now we have to think about how can we get that data in Texas. And we came up with some novel solutions to do that. I think schools themselves, your contact person who helped you develop part of the grant, that may help you find people or find instances or events that you're looking at. These people may leave. And you have to go and form that new connection and just make sure that everybody's on board. So there's going to be a lot of change, and it can be at all levels. It can be from the subjects, it can be from a certain methodology that you thought you would use isn't working, or you may get some really dramatic findings and you're like, we just really have to expand the course of this to capture this moment. Just keep keep your calm about all this. I just want to say that keep calm, it'll be okay. Always keep your eye on what the end product is, but know that there's going to be change and just trying to work with that level of change. Like some changes are going to be simple, the more complex changes, and I'm going to talk more about this, you'll definitely want to talk to your PI about, but or not your PI, but your program officer. And that's a really important person to talk to. But there's going to be change, and just embrace it, and figure it out with your project team and any of the other people. We're going to give you suggestions for other people too to talk to, but just figure it out and just continue to make it work. All right, Doug, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, anybody with it who had a grant in 2020 had to embrace a lot of change, right? Like, that there were whole study methodologies that had to be upended and rethought. And it was encouraging to me that it was possible and people did it. And that was a very large change. And so I always go back to that as like almost a worst case scenario now of like, wow, we had to change everything.
It was huge. Yeah, we had to too, right? We weren't on this Noyce, but yeah, everything changed. We had a whole face-to-face program planned over 2 years, and we put it all online. And people said it couldn't be done, and it was done. And we were able to we even got clearance to collect data. So, which was even more surprising to us. Yeah. But anyway, you're right. Things will change. That's the extreme condition.
Okay. Next one is, everybody has to do an IRB before you get awarded a track 4. Like that's standard. And most everybody on this call has done human subjects training and understands, I don't know, in New Jersey, we have to do our ethics research, or maybe it's because we're New Jersey, but we have to do the ethics training very frequently in New Jersey. No researchers are ending up with gold bars in their suit closet, but there are things that happen. And so this tip is like, keep everything above board and beware of those shortcuts that aren't really shortcuts. There are a lot of like hazards right now in the STEM education space. Things that look like they'll be helpful, but they might not be. And some of us have dealt with that even in our own teaching and research. Things like, I think many people have received a ChatGPT generated research study that you're like, yeah, I don't think these citations exist, right? Like, so there's that. There's AI Zoom assistants. There's lots of bells and whistles out there that look like they'll be great. And if there's a tool in your toolbox that's going to be useful, by all means use it. But a lot of times those tools can be distracting, and they can move you away from the reasons that you got into the track 4 to begin with. On a related note, sometimes as a researcher, you find yourself in the possession of data that you simply should not have. That you shouldn't have and that you shouldn't use. So my advice is don't use it. Anybody who we use staffing data. Some of the staffing data we got it from the state, from a Freedom of Information Act request, right? Actually, they call it open public records in New Jersey. But that stuff some of it had social security numbers in it. Some had dates of birth in it. I'm like, why are they sending us these files? This stuff should be redacted. You'll get stuff if you're working with teachers, you'll get stuff from teachers with students' names on it and some really compelling data. They might send you a video that they took of their classroom that has students in it. And again, like that's going to be an ethical temptation for some because, it's really good data. But if you shortcut the permissions, or you might also find administrators might pressure people to participate in a study and you didn't know that. So my general advice is to just keep everything above board, that even when it takes a little extra work, to make sure that you get that permission, that human subjects form signed, or that you have the permission to use that student work. That's going to strengthen your project ultimately. Because if you produce something that has data in it that you were not given permission, even if they gave you the data, if you didn't have permission to use in your research, it shouldn't be used, and it actually can. And I mean, we had a case of it at our university. I won't say wasn't me, but we had a case where something came back to bite somebody, and it was not pleasant. And actually, it turned out that the researcher did have everything above board, and that things were signed, and that the a school district was upset with the way a research report came out, but somebody had signed off on it, and everything was there. So the researcher was actually protected in that case because she had done everything correctly. So again, there will be lots of temptations out there, but you want to look back on your research study with pride and not worried that somebody's going to find something that's going to cause you to have to retract it. And that stuff is happening all around. I mean, pick up any issue of Science, AAAS, you will see, there's always a story about research misconduct in that first, opening pages. Somebody somewhere has done something naughty. And that includes, treating the team that you're working with correctly. But I think it was surprising to me how many opportunities for behaving badly there were if somebody was going to take that. And always choose the high road. You'll be grateful for it later on.
Thanks, Doug. That's great. So kind of going on to the next part, I just want to remind you too, as a PI, that you're part of a community. And I think sometimes we forget about that. And I think NSF and AAAS have done a great job in really building and Noyce community. We'll have a national conference. We also have regional conferences where we can get together. And this community is really important. Like, you are going to get a lot of great tips and a lot of great suggestions from this community. And again, if your project changes too, you're going to get some great insights about potentially how to navigate that. And I think this is something really important just to keep in the front of your mind. I love it personally when somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, do you have like 15 minutes that we can talk about a Noyce problem? And I'm like, sure, I'm happy to chat with you about it. And it just works so well. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all want each other to succeed. And when we all succeed, it makes this program look better. And it makes our work look really important too. So we're all in this together, and don't ever hesitate or think twice about reaching out to somebody to ask for help. And that also includes your program officer, because they're also an important part of your community. But it's important. Reach out to the other PIs, reach out to people you know. And what's the worst they're going to say is, I don't have time right now, but maybe you can reach out to this person or something else. And there's always somebody who's willing to help, who's been through the same situation, who can figure out how to, solve a problem or add a little extra to your work that makes sure that it just has that real nice polish on it. So you're part of a community, and we're better together.
I would say that's actually one of my favorite things about the national conference is that I feel like, I've done that to people, but now people do it to me, pull me aside. Hey, can we talk for 10 minutes? I have this Noyce problem, or I have this thing. And I think it's a really important and understated aspect of this Noyce community is that ability to reach out to people and, figure things out. And I'll extend that to, if you're running a track 4, so we had an advisory board, and actually Julie was on our advisory board for our grant, but having a group of people that you can pose problems to and say, well, have you thought about this or that or that? And sometimes, well, not sometimes, almost every time, an idea will come up that, our team hasn't thought of, but wow, that would make a big difference if we can implement that.
I'm just going to play off of that. One of the best ideas I got, and I just thought this was brilliant, was, and this was years ago, somebody said, oh, at the end of every year, the person wrote like a 1-page, 2-page overview of, what kind of findings the grant had and what new insights they were gleaning and what they were going to do next. And some districts that you partner with require that, but a lot don't, right? And so it just shows so much goodwill when you just say, hey, look, we finished the first year, want you to see, what good work we're doing. Here's a one-page summary. And it never fails when I do that now, that I get a superintendent who calls me and says, I just want to talk to you about some of these things and what it means for us. And I'm thinking, that's so important. So these good tips really make your project better. Just one example of a tip. Right.
Okay, so the next tip, we sort of talked about the grant manager already, but tip number 7 is keep a shadow budget. So your budget, the way that the federal funds work is they go to the institution. They don't go to you in particular, but they go to your institution. And somebody's job at the institution is to make sure whatever money is supposed to move or stay, moves or stays. And yet, at the end of the grant, one of the tasks that you have to do is make sure that, okay, here are all the funds that we spent, here are the unspent funds. You want to make that unspent funds. You want to make it as small as possible because you've done all the work that you promised that you would do. That's how this is supposed to work. It's never quite exact because, salaries go up and down and expenses. Our travel budget for 2021 was almost zero. And so we had different opportunities. But if you're PI, one of the best things that you can do is to keep a shadow budget, keep an Excel spreadsheet that mirrors what your institution is keeping, but you can keep it as up to date as you can, so that you can make decisions. Because sometimes, depending on how your university does things, usually on a quarter system or sometimes monthly, but there's money that's encumbered in different ways depending on how salaries work at your institution. So you never quite know exactly how much money you have or how much is already allocated unless you are keeping that information yourself. So I always keep a shadow budget. I try to update it as regularly as I can, so that I can make decisions about, like, for example, it is a track 1 issue, but right now we had more candidates than we thought we would have in our track 1, but they needed fewer semesters of support because some of them came to us later. So what we had budgeted for, okay, we're going to have 4 semesters for all these candidates. Well, it's going to be 3 semesters for this one, 4 for that, 2 for that. And so now I have to recalculate, well, how many more scholarships can we offer, right? And if I depended on my university for the answer to that question, they might not give me the right answer because of the way they allocate those funds. But because I have a shadow budget, I know, okay, I have this many semesters of support left and I can move it around in this particular way. And so that's a result of keeping that shadow budget. Okay, back to you, Julie.
Yeah, that's pretty important. And it kind of builds on to what my other tip is get to know your program officer. The program officer is on the front line for a lot for you. And what I love about program officers is they're there to make you succeed, right? They are really invested in you. They know the discussion that was around the table about your project. They know what the promise it has, and they really want to see it get carried out. And so, and sometimes you just get in a bind and you're like, I just don't know what to do. Pick up the phone and call your program officer. They have great ideas, and they have seen everything, and they know how to handle everything, and they will give you great insights. And so I remember once having a problem with collecting data. We were working in classrooms and schools, and I called the program officer, and the program officer was just like really calm about this. I'm like, I'm not getting this data. The grad students are having a hard time. And the program officer said, just use some of your grad student money and hire somebody. And I'm like, wow, I can do that? And they're like, yeah, you can. And so it was great. It was such a simple, elegant solution to a problem that was really perplexing to me. So program officers are great. And there's another time that a program officer really helped out. I had some surplus funds left over from a different Noyce program, or from a different program. It wasn't a Noyce program. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this extra money. But in the program, we had actually written several books. And it turned out, they said, why don't you just buy the books and do a session at a local science teachers conference and hand out the books? And I'm like, that's great. And it was, at the time it was approved and went through. I mean, obviously guidelines change over time, but it was a good suggestion, and it actually helped, again, helped disseminate more of the work we were doing in a more broad level, which I really appreciate. So program officers, they get back to you quickly. They'll always find a time to talk to you. Our last program officer was really interested in some of the findings on our current project. We have a new program officer on Racer, but the one previously was really seeing the data that we were coming in with and saw that there were some really interesting findings, and we needed just a little extra money to carry on the data collection for one more year. And they said, we can't promise it, but you can request a supplemental piece to, collect additional data if you need it. And we did, and we got the additional funding to actually take the data one more year, which we think is going to really highlight some of the findings. So again, these program officers are on the front end, and they want to see the project succeed. And it's just good to touch base with them. You can see them at the national conference. You can always call them or email them and set up a time to talk online or on the phone. So they're incredibly, they've always been there to help and have always had really good suggestions.
Thanks, Julie. So we're coming in for a landing here. We just have a couple more little things. One is that your institution would really likes publicizing your work. This goes back to what Julie was saying about sharing your work. But this is more of the PR side. There's nothing a college administrator loves more than having a project to talk about. And so anything that you can give them that will help them boast about you and the great work being done in the institution or in the college, the university, whatever, that just builds goodwill. And I'll just say one of the things that we did with our we did this with a track 1 kind of track 4 track 1 crossover is we set up a photo shoot. We just needed pictures for slides and for marketing of our teachers working with students in one of our partner districts. And so we got permission, we got all the forms signed, we got everything we needed, and we just spent a morning walking around Barringer High School in Newark taking photos. And that was 7 years ago. I still see them I saw one in a marketing email this morning because our university photographer was part of that. They get uploaded to another set. And now we have pictures of high quality teaching and learning and the types of teaching that we're hoping is happening in schools. We have pictures of that can be used everywhere. And so we were leveraging those relationships that we had built, but it had sort of this secondary effect that made it valuable to our university in a way that we had not anticipated.
All right, and I'm gonna take that cue, Doug. So I think the really important thing, and this is something that I think a lot about when I look at track 4s, I do really enjoy walking through the national conference, the National Noyce Conference, and looking at the track 4s. I get lots of good ideas, but sometimes I'm a little concerned that they're under theorized or under conceptualized. And it's important that you have a good theoretical framing for your project. It's important that it be explicit. And I think that helps your findings connect to the larger theory universe, right? We know the positionality that you have when you come in and you're thinking about your project. And the same can be said with the conceptual framework. And I personally don't mind if you go either way, theoretical or conceptual framework, but it is really important to have some, either theoretical or a conceptual framework. And that conceptual framework really, again, points the reader or the person who's interested in your work to like what you're exploring for and what you're trying to understand. And I think our community, the educational research community, has worked really hard to make these frameworks more explicit. And I think we're in a really good position just to keep elevating theoretical and conceptual frameworks in our own work. So just don't forget those. I always feel sad when I just see a literature review. I want to see a little bit more that positions the paper or really, points me in the direction of what they're trying to understand. And Doug has, I don't even know if they can see it. Do you have your video still about the difference?
Oh, I can pull that up.
So Doug has
I hadn't even thought of that. As you're talking,
I loved it. Yeah. So Doug and I did a little thing this summer over conceptual and theoretical frameworks for new researchers, and Doug created this wonderful video. And then I'm gonna do something that it's kind of shameless, but everybody has said it's been good and helpful. It's a downloadable free article. It was published in LSC, the CB Life Science Education Journal, and it's free, and it's about the difference between literature reviews, conceptual frameworks, and theoretical frameworks. So we'll put 2 resources up that will help you kind of navigate this terrain too. And people have found this article really helpful. That's the only reason I share it. If it wasn't getting a lot of press, I definitely would not, but it has close to like over 200,000 downloads. So. Did you? Oh,
yeah, here it is. I got it. Sorry, it took me a minute.
that's all right.
Okay.
And I don't know, again, if you
Watch this later. Don't watch it now, please.
yeah, don't watch it now, but it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, so Julie was talking about theoretical frameworks, and I just want to mention that, one of the opportunities we have as researchers is to, go outside our narrow band of the theoretical frameworks that are usually used. And sometimes there's a good reason for using those frameworks. But especially if you're trying to rethink an old problem, sometimes going outside of the science education literature can be really helpful. And I'll just give the example in our track 4, we were looking at science teacher retention, and a lot of the frameworks that we looked at weren't what we needed. And so we went over to the human resource literature, and we were surprised at how much human resource literature there is. I guess there's a lot of people hire and a lot of people study. A lot of business schools have stuff going on, but there was a framework over there called job embeddedness that we plucked out, and we fashioned it just for teachers and called it teacher embeddedness. And there's nothing more practical than a good theory. That old Kurt Lewin quote, right? That it has been really helpful to us to go outside of that and then bring that theoretical lens back in to do things that our theoretical frameworks weren't able to do. I think the last thing is the last thing I have is we talked about advisory board meetings, and again for track 4 you have the option of, instead of doing project evaluation, to do an advisory board, and sometimes that's made clear to people and sometimes it's not. But I highly recommend the advisory board route. And it's more than just a dog and pony show for 3 people, right? It's a warts and all show, right? Like, here's what's working, here's what's not. And so I think some people are hesitant, and there can be lots of reasons for that, for showing that something isn't going well. But that advisory board is really key to helping you solve those problems. So sharing where things aren't working, and not just making the advisory board an accountability audience, right? They're your partners in solving some of those thorny issues. And so I encourage you to use your advisory board for the expertise that you invited them for, right? Like, they do have expertise, they come with different perspectives, and when you get a bunch of people in a room who have experience, and you present them with a problem, they're going to generate solutions. Some of them might work for you, some might not, but they'll at least give you stuff to think about. That would be very different if you were just presenting them to an audience and being, see what a good job we did, right? Like, that's not a good use for an advisory board. An advisory board is really like, okay, let's get you up to speed on where we are with the project, and now here's what we want to talk about. Like, here's how you can be helpful. And I think that's really the best case use for an advisory board.
I think, and I think Doug and I have tried to cover as many areas as possible, but we would love to hear a question or a comment. Maybe there's something you want us to talk about a little more. I know, we're happy to share some of the wisdom that we have over the years. And don't hesitate to reach out too. But if you have something, if you can just put something in the chat, that would be great for us. It can be like, oh, I appreciate hearing this, or it could be, can you talk a little more about this, or a question maybe that you have that you really want us to answer. And we'll give you a few seconds to do that. While Doug and I talk.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I saw we had some people join after we had posted the link
Oh.
for the slides. I'll just repost that
That'd be
again.
great.
And these, I think these will be, Drew said he would send them out with the follow-up.
And I really appreciate, Doug, your comment about the advisory board. I love my advisory boards. You know, and it's funny because I don't get the same, we usually pick people out. We have like one science ed person and then we pick outside. So it really pushes our thinking, and I like that a lot. No comments, no questions. We're feeling a little unloved here.
There we go. They're starting to roll in. Julie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so could you please discuss how to work efficiently in teams consisting of both university faculty focused on research
Yeah.
and faculty from teaching-oriented institutions such as community colleges, navigate potential differences in priorities or perceptions, particularly when it comes to delegating work?
Do you want me to tackle
Yeah, why
that?
don't you take first swing at that one?
Okay, so I think this is a great question because it happens a lot. You get a lot of people who are on these projects who have, you know, different interests. And what I've had to do is really make it clear from the get-go, like these are the outcomes that we're really working towards. And, you know, and maybe somebody has a different orientation to it too, but really trying to make sure, and I appreciated Doug's comment about tasks. Like, so if I have somebody who's from and it's mostly from another department or another college in the university, you know, making clear that they know exactly what, like, this what they want to do on the project, right? So if we're collecting data and they're doing the analysis, or if they're doing the intervention, that's their role. And I just want to make sure that they feel empowered to do it. And that they have opportunities to, you know, talk about it. And you know, and sometimes it doesn't quite go as well as you want. Like maybe it might not be going in the direction that you need it to go because you are the PI and it has to go that way. You know, you can offer suggestions. That's what I've often done, saying, well, can you run this analysis? Or can you do this? Or let's think about this. And sometimes what I'll often do in meetings is just change the format and have the person present what their work is, and then they can get some feedback. And sometimes that helps kind of make sure that they know what they're doing. But I think, you know, a big part of it is just making sure that, you know, people can see what the end product is and where the contributions are by who on the end products, and kind of holding those accountable and having a little bit of a checklist with it. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and, you know, and that happens. And when things don't work out, you kind of just have to figure out where do you want to, how do you want to support the person so they can get their work done and still meet the obligation of the grant. And there are a lot of novel ways to address that.
I would say on a practical level, there's a couple things. One is to simply like make that question a topic of your first meeting together. Figure
Yeah.
out how you're going to allocate the work, and that probably should be proportional to the amount of funding people are receiving to be on that project, right? So yeah, I think sometimes it's easy for PIs to forget that not everybody is getting the same pay that they are, right? And so that's a part of it. Another big thing is actually where you meet. So meeting on Zoom is great, but sometimes people want you to come to them so you can experience their context, especially if you're collaborating with another institution that's very different from your own, whether you're at a community college or you're at a teaching institution or you're at a research institution. Having rotating meetings, okay, today we're going to meet, and sometimes you end up in the school library because that's the only place you can talk, but that's still somebody's home turf, and it feels right, and it feels like you're coming to them. There's a respect thing that happens when you can show up for people, and we can show up for them in different ways. Obviously, part of that is with you know, talking about what are the roles for this and what do we do when we need help. I think the biggest issues, quite frankly, have been that you know, we have words that are the same word, but they mean different things at institutions. One that vexed us for a while was this notion of a course buyout. Means something totally different at a community college, who we're partnering with now, than it does at a research institution. And so, doing it, it is almost cross-cultural in a way, where you have to dig down a little. You can't just go with the surface level language. You have to dig down. Okay, what does a course buyout mean? How does that happen here versus how it happens there? And summer work is another one. Like, summer is completely different at different institutions. Some places, the summer operations are housed in a completely different place than the regular rest of the school year. So I would encourage you to be explicit about those conversations, and recognize that sometimes efficiency is one goal, but sometimes giving people a little bit of time to learn, which is more inefficient in the short term, can be more beneficial in the long term by working with people and prioritizing the relationship to a degree over the project. But if there are deliverables that are due at a certain time and somebody's not producing, having a way to have that conversation is really important as well.
So I want to tackle one last question because there's a good one here, and I fell onto this last year and I really like it. How do you recommend sharing research with teachers? And I love this. So what I've started doing is I actually share the data. So I'll put up the data table or the graph or the figure, and they know they're in the project, and I'll say something like, so what do you see here? And they actually help me co-analyze it, or we talk about it, and I can talk about what I see and what they see. And it's really been useful in terms of getting teachers, me and teachers, right, on the same page. Like, they see something and I may have had one explanation and it was completely wrong. And they're like, no, you don't get this. This is really what's happening. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I had no idea. So we really, I really like this, and it's just been such powerful conversations that we've had. And teachers will say, like, wow, so I wonder if that's the best way to do something. And I think that's a good question sometimes, right? So sharing the data really explicitly is been like one of and having conversations about the data versus me saying, oh, here's the data, this is what I analyzed, this is what I found. That doesn't do anything. But actually having teachers really engage, or district science coordinators really engage in looking at that data, has been really, really fun. It was an unintended partnership.
So I think, Julie, we're ready to hand things back to Drew for his closing remarks. Drew, you there?
Yep. Yeah, just have a few more remarks for y'all. Thank you both so much for leading such a wonderful and intimate session. I'm gonna pull up my last little slide. Nothing. Yep. So as said, before we go, I'd like to thank our wonderful speakers, the rest of the AAAS Noyce team, and all of you who are able to join and participate today. As mentioned, this is the first installment of our 2024 PI Peer series. The rest of the Noyce tracks will be covered in the coming weeks. We're putting the information for those sessions in the chat. Up next is track 3 on Tuesday, December 10th, with Matt Campbell, Paige Evans, and Greg Rushton. A little graphic I'll show. So we have track 3 next on December 10th, track 2 on December 12th, and then track 1 on December 17th. We have a survey link, which we are posting in the chat and sending via email. The survey should only take a few minutes, but since it's our first time doing this PI Peer series, it'd be really wonderful to have your feedback. Let us know what you enjoyed, let us you'd like to see more of, so we can keep doing these in the future. And I also want to highlight an opportunity that's currently existing. The AAAS ARISE is accepting blog submissions. The ARISE project seeks to provide resources, tools, and community to foster research and evidence-based innovation in STEM pre-service teacher education and leadership development programs. Through the ARISE blog series, we have shared information about topics and strategies for preparing STEM teachers for the future, assessing efficacy in STEM teaching, and understanding effective ways to recruit, train, and retain a quality STEM teacher workforce. In 2025, the goals remain the same, but we seek to focus on particular communities such as rural, urban, and indigenous, promising practices from a range of institutions, such as HBCUs, TCUs, HSIs, small liberal arts, community colleges, to reach the broad collection of Noyce projects and constituencies. If you'd like to submit your work, check out the AAAS-arise.org website. and submissions are due December 16th. So we have this information on our websites, all channels. If you have work you'd like to showcase, I'd say get a submission in there and we'll review those for the new year. And so with that, we hope to see you next week for the rest of the Noyce PI Peer Series. And until next time, and as always, take care and thank you all so much.